Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen Henry Madoff, the chair of the MA Curatorial Practice program at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. And each week we do the curatorial roundtable where I invite a distinguished curator or institution director to join us to talk about their practice. And today I'm really happy to have my colleague, Henk Slager, and I'm going to read a short bio for Hank and turn things over to him. So, as visiting professor of artistic research at the Finnish Academy of Fine Art, um, former dean of the Utrecht Graduate School of Visual Art and Design, and for 25 years a lecturer at DiApel, Henk has made significant contributions to the debate on the role of research in visual art. In 2004, with Jan Kaila and Gertrude Sundqvist, he initiated the European Artistic Research Network, known as EARN, a network that investigates the impacts of artistic research on current art education through symposia, expert meetings, and presentations. As well, Henk is a founder within the research network of the Curatorial Studies Workshop, an international group of educators, curators, and theorists considering aspects of curating and the curatorial, of which I'm also a member. Henk has produced and co-produced too many curatorial projects for me to mention here. I'm just going to mention one, the 9th Bucharest Biennial in 2020 that I believe Henk is going to talk about today. Henk is also widely published. I'll just mention one of his publications as relevant to today's talk, The Pleasure of Research, an Overview of Educational and Curatorial Research Projects from 2007 to 2014, published in 2015 by Hatje Kantz. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Henk. I'll just say one thing. So Henk will speak for about 50 minutes, 50 minutes, and then that's the time at the bottom of your screen where you see the Q&A to answer any kind of question or comment you have for Henk. So with that, Henk, welcome.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you so much for the introduction, and also thank you for this honorable invitation. It's a great pleasure, always a dream to be part of the curatorial roundtable. So today it's going to happen, and I'm really happy to share with you some thoughts about curating artistic research. What I'm going to do now is share the screen. There it is, the PowerPoint called Curating Artistic Research. So this is the topic for today. We're going to talk about the specificness of curating artistic research. Stephen already mentioned, I'm going to start from a series of projects. I think this was also in the short summary. I will start discussing two major projects, the research pavilion that I co-organized in the context of the Venice Biennale during the period of 2015-2019, and a project called Farewell to Research that was developed for the 9th Bucharest Biennale in 2020, and that parts of it were postponed. And then in the end, I will also give some thoughts on a project that I'm currently developing for the upcoming Asia Triennial Manchester called Transvaluation. So I will discuss these different projects from the perspective of the overarching question of today: what is the specificity of a research exhibition as a curatorial format? So in order to zoom in on that topic, I start with the following question. What are the conditions and scenarios for making artistic research public? Or to formulate it another way, does this field of artistic research require special modes and strategies of dissemination? Does it need curatorial protocols or platforms of display, or can these novel art practices stretch and recalibrate the existing models from within, so that we see some kind of expanded exhibition forms and formats that require new contexts of collaboration and interaction? This discussion was, of course, quite colored by the publication that was made public last year, the book Disordered Attention by Claire Bishop. How do we look at art and performance today? And part of this book was already pre-published in Artforum as an article called Information Overload, that focused on the current situation of research-based art. In this article, Claire Bishop points out the danger of the current academization of art. And she sees that this, let's say, academicized art is organized around strong arguments and ethical claims. We see in this field of art testimonies in the name of social and planetary justice. And besides that, Bishop notices that there are recognizable formulas and forms of research-based art. In the field of contemporary art, we see a lot of photo documentary captioning. We see a lot of film essays. And besides that, there's also the strong presence of the intellectual milieu of PhD programs with their pressure of academization, their focus on knowledge production, so that creates some specific exhibitionary formats. And related to that, Bishop asked the question, do we nowadays run the risk that this new repertoire, that then kind of new orthodoxy will emerge, that we can describe as a archive on display, something that is characterized by a lot of horizontal presentation strategies of showcases, tables, and shelves? Or, and that's of course the question that we will try to address today, can curating artistic research ultimately lead to the generation of expanded exhibition forms that require new context of collaboration and interaction? I will start this discussion with the first project that was called the Research Pavilion. The first iteration of the Research Pavilion actually happened in 2015, but there is a so-called prehistory. When we as EARN organized in the context of the Finnish Pavilion 2013, a discursive event that was called the Counter Order of Things. After that, with a group of people, we started this specific conversation asking ourselves, what does it actually mean if we could have our own pavilion, our own platform within this, let's say, entire biennial structure, a platform that will specifically address the field of artistic research and its politics and its strategies of dissemination. After that, I didn't hear anything about that, but suddenly in the end of 2013, I was contacted by UniArts Helsinki with the positive news like, yes, we're going to do it. And there was also another happy coincidence. At that time, I was co-directing the Guangzhou Triennial in China, and the Chinese government, and for that triennial, I had rented a space in Venice in order to present the satellite project of the Guangzhou Triennial. But at that time, the Chinese government, the Cultural Bureau, decided to diminish the amount of satellite projects in Venice. So suddenly, the Sala del Comina was available for another project. So here's the logistics, and the other project was, of course, the first research pavilion. So I could connect with my colleagues in Helsinki and start working on this new project. And this was, of course, a quite tough project because we only had 5 months for preparing the whole event. We started in November, it was announced that there was budget for making this project possible. We started with the discussion about this exhibition in December 2014. The first thing we did was organizing a series of think tanks in Helsinki, in which we developed the quite concise concept called experimentality. Connected to that, we had a look at a series of contemporary art practices, and we invited 4 artists to become our keynote projects to present a specific work within this pavilion. So the artists are Hito Style from Germany, Mats Leidestam from Sweden, Chong Ang from the Netherlands, and Magnus Barthes from Sweden. Parallel to that, or in addition to that, we announced an open call for research contributions, and we did that in January 2015. And immediately 3 weeks after that call, we had already the selection, and based on 20 proposals, we selected 8 projects for the pavilion. And then we only had 2 months left for organizing basically everything: the logistics, the transport, and the communication. And that's what we did in the period of March, April 2015. So in the end, we could produce a project with 12 research projects, but we did not only put everything on display. Parallel to that, we also organized 2 months of intense process of discussions, screenings, interventions, seminars. So from the beginning of May until the end of June, there was an ongoing program connected to the theme of experimentality. So these were the 3 main questions of the pavilion. The pavilion wanted to figure out whether the discourse on artistic research and its methodologies redefine our ideas regarding experiments and experimentality. That was the first question. Then the other one, does the current discussion, the current discourse and the practice of artistic research generates new types of methodologies, reassessing the nature of experimentation? And the last question was about the concept of laboratory. And of course, this concept of laboratory was introduced in the field of contemporary art by Hans Ulrich and Barbara van der Linden in the project called Laboratory that they organized in 1999 for the cultural capital of Antwerp. And we invited Hans Ulrich to discuss with us, to give further thoughts on whether these concepts of laboratory still make sense within the contemporary discussion, specifically connected to the discussion about artistic research. So this is the way we advertised the pavilion, with large posters at specific Vaporetto stations. And this is the place itself. This is the Sala del Camino, an old monastery at the heart of Giudecca, a 300 square meter exhibition space that was used before for other pavilions. As far as I remember, India and Palestine also used this in the years before our exhibition. This is the entrance of the first research pavilion. On the right side, you see a project by Mats Leidestam called After Image, and it presents a series of artistic research strategies that explore the concept of queer reading old paintings. And in the middle, you see the work by Hito Style called Strike, which is a statement about the current explosion, the imagery of the spectacle, and of course, including a plea for more poor image constructions, conditions. And this is the heart of the pavilion that we call the workstation. So here is documentation of research projects, presentations of different activities, and also a platform for, if we take the screens away, we can use this also as a platform for more performative activities. And because of the wall in the space that was a given, we could use also a separate space for more discursive activities, for more seminar activities, and also for screenings of works. What we couldn't expect was that this pavilion, that we basically conceived ourselves as just a statement or a radical experiment, that it would attract so much attention and positive feedback. At the opening, there were more than 1,200 people, and including officials from a lot of Nordic art institutions, and they encouraged us to continue with the project. So we were invited to develop a second iteration of the project for the year of 2017. This was organized with a larger team of think tanks, including researchers and artists from not only the Nordic countries, but also from Switzerland and Austria. And we formulated in these think tanks the concept of the utopia of access. As you maybe know, in Europe, there is a huge discussion about open access, specifically because the ministries of culture have decided that all research that's funded with European money has to be made public in an open, accessible way. And related to that given, specifically, we were wondering what does that actually mean for the field of artistic research? Will this strategies, this politics of open access in the end result in a decline of human imagination? And will the, let's say, radical potential of artistic research disappear? So we did also an open call again, and we presented 12 different researchers that approached this topic from different perspectives, from the perspective of the openness of art, from the perspective of the openness of the Fortress Europe and let's say current geopolitics, and also the question of the openness or the clarity, the transparency of the new visual techniques that are currently available. And the first project at the entrance of the pavilion zooms in on that last topic. It's a project by Bul Miletić, and they explore the conditions of a, let's say, effective cartography. What they do is confronting old 16th century maps with images that are produced by drones. And in this confrontation, in this dialogue, they want to, let's say, address the illusion of access and transparency. Then this is the middle of the pavilion. You see on the left side an installation by Behzad Khosravi. This project is called Accessing Utopia, and it consists of a series of interviews with post-migrants. They just entered Sweden, and the artist is talking with them about their experiences of integration in Europe, the imaginations they have about Europe, and in the end, the utopias they have of living in Europe. Then in the middle, in that small blue box, there is a video work by the artist André Alves, and he is in this video work in dialogue with Nietzsche's Wanderer, and he's thinking about the current openness that is produced and given by the conditions of artistic practice. And on the right side, the work by Niran Baybulat, who is reflecting on the current situation of indigenous languages, specifically the Tatarian language in Finland, and the risk that it has to disappear because of the, let's say, global European languages. Again, an installation view of the work of Behzad Khosravi. And then in the seminar space, we wanted to have it a little bit more dynamic. So we invited artist Eva Weimeyer to produce an open source library, but also a reflection on the access, what she calls the library of inclusions, and the omissions that are happening because of the current marketization of libraries with their specific policies of exclusions, and asking ourselves what kind of publications are excluded and can we include them in this project. After the second iteration, we felt again the necessity of rethinking the project called Research Pavilion. Also based on a lot of critique that we got on these two iterations, because a lot of people told us it looks quite like a traditional pavilion. And what is the difference between the Research Pavilion and other pavilions that you see in the Venice Biennale? So there was now a strong urge to reflect again about the specificness of the given of a research pavilion, and asking ourselves, what does this pavilion actually disseminate, and what kind of difference does such a project make in the context of the hegemonic biennial machine of the Venice Biennale. So we, as curatorial team, we decided to shift the curatorial agenda, and instead of inviting individual projects, we decided to reorganize the call, and we just wanted to go for collective projects, more dynamic projects, projects that are in process, that are not based on individual practices, but that are part of working groups and people that are working together. And in this, let's say, display system, we didn't want to show artistic research, but we just wanted to let artistic research take place so that there's a kind of ongoing process happening in the space. And we also wanted to reformulate the position of the curatorial team and conceive ourselves more as conveners, people who catalyze the project, people who facilitate the processes instead of producing an overarching frame or agenda. So this is the way we announced the third pavilion on eFlux. Instead of being focused on a curated exhibition, the third research pavilions offers a view on the manifold practices of artistic research. The participating researchers, organized as 8 collective cells, will showcase their work in parallel processes of exhibiting, performing, and exposing and discussing artistic research. The overarching title of the pavilion, Research Ecologies, refers to the rich network of approaches involved. How can a band work as a transdisciplinary research group? Or in what way do artists research contaminated soil? Emerging topics in this year's pavilion are related to ecology, humans' relationship to nature, other modes of agency, phenomenological methodologies, and speculative fictions. The pavilion will be a vibrant, changing space that presents the multiple methods and practices of conducting artistic research. Some sections will be arranged as exhibitions, some built on participation or performative research. The artist researchers will also work together in residency periods in Venice. So sometimes they stay there for 3-4 weeks in order to produce the work. And parallel to that, they will organize events, workshops, performances, and discussions that are all the time open to the public. So when we opened the pavilion, there was what we called a so-called 0-degree situation. So a lot of things were not on display yet, but they were just given as materials, ingredients that were needed for constructing the different activities. So, for example, this is one research cell called Disruptive Processes, a project that want to construct a temporal agora. So they built an agora in the space in which discussions and processes about unlearning and activism took place. Then this is a more static discursive presentation. Project is called Cemetery Archipelago, and it focuses on current and necropolitical imaginations and imaginaries. The group Phenomena themselves is a more discursive group. They reread and rediscuss topics from philosophical phenomenology in order to figure out what kind of elements can be used for rethinking the field of artistic research. And the final one in this presentation is the project called Artistic Intelligence, and they focus on new matters of fiction, speculative realism, and material realities. This is the floor plan, but it's not a fixed floor plan, as you can imagine. Sometimes some 2 exhibitions in this floor plan were fixed. On the one side, a project called Shelters, a Korean research group, focuses on spatial practices, and on the left side, this discursive presentation of Cemetery Archipelago. But the other ones were more dynamic, so they had their high season, and they occupied more space, and after that they became smaller. So these were things that were all the time, the floor plan was all the time in flux. You can say that the curatorial narrative of this third research pavilion articulated all kinds of urgencies that are related to topical forms of material thinking, different or other ways of mattering, exploring matter as a dynamic and vibrant process. And with this, let's say, curatorial agenda, with this curatorial narrative, the third research pavilion was fully in line with the current debate on the post-human predicament, the emancipation of matter, a relational approach to modes of agency, development of transdisciplinary or transversal discourses, as well as exploring new forms of criticism in the form of neo-materialistic propositions. So much about the research pavilion. I now move to the second project, the project Farewell to Research, that I developed for the 9th edition of the Bucharest Biennale. And here you see on the website of the Biennial Foundation a short description, profile, agenda, narrative of the Bucharest Biennale. The Bucharest Biennale says, our starting point is a strong focus on conceptual perspectives. So it's not only putting aesthetics on display, it's also not a biennial that focuses on city branding, but this biennial has a very strong ambition to enable encounters with other modes of knowledge and constituting new realities. And on the same page of the Biennial Foundation website, it mentions the Bucharest Biennale assumes the urge of a dialogue with the public, of a platform for artists, as much as the need of reinventing new forms of artistic expression. So when I was talking with the directors of the Bucharest Biennale, I suggested that in this framework, as I just described, I could strongly imagine a project that will focus on the topical state of the artistic research discussion, a discussion that has been dominated for at least 10 years now in the field of artistic practice. And at that moment, we were in 2020, so it felt a perfect moment after 10 years as we conceived the period of 2010 to 2020 as a research decade. I thought it was a good moment for evaluating that period of time, but also to come with some constructive suggestions for future concepts and other perspectives on this field of artistic research. And for this 9 Bucharest Biennale, I took as a title Farewell to Research, not only as a provocation, but also referring to the book by the philosopher of science Paul Feyerabend, who wrote in 1987 the book Farewell to Reason. And in this book, he was just criticizing the strong presence of rational knowledge in the field of science. And a little bit parallel to that, or inspired by that, the Bucharest Biennale wanted to evaluate and to rethink the position of research in the field of art. And then to be clear, what do I mean with this concept of farewell? Farewell is not a denial of the importance. This is from the curatorial brief. Farewell is not a denial of the importance of this intellectual tradition of research. However, as a leading discourse for art, research is showing its limitation in being increasingly institutionalized as an ideological concept. Artistic research has generated its own restrictions that hinder the emergence of creativity and also hinders fresh theoretical interfaces. So to say farewell to research is not simply a departure, but specifically a revisit or a restart to start rethinking about what do we actually mean with artistic research. So, for example, a rethink could be, could we formulate a proposition based on a recomposition of three conceptual spaces: creative practice, artistic thinking, and curatorial strategies that intersect when artistic research takes place. So basically, this was my proposition for the 9th Bucharest Biennale. Artistic research could best be described as a transpositional framework, a non-disciplined space where a triangular relationship of creative practice, artistic thinking, and curatorial strategies continually produce new sets of relationships that make idiosyncratic contributions to the articulation of urgent planetary issues. This is also what I described in the journal that Stephen yesterday launched, the journal Critical Curating, and in this I wrote the article Changing Concepts of Curatorial Inquiry, Care, Ethics and Research. So in this article I also elaborate on this specific curatorial proposition connected with the concept of care. So this was the plan that we presented to the team of the Bucharest Biennale. I wanted to invite three keynote artists that work on the topic. Then I wanted to organize a performative research conference at the beginning of the Bucharest Biennale, for which we select 14 artists from different research programs in Europe. I traveled around for half a year visiting 10 different programs, had meetings with different researchers, and in the end, based on their proposals, we selected 14 artists to be part of this project. We imagined then an exhibition in process so that people will stay for a longer period of time in Bucharest and will work together in the space on an exhibition in process. And this exhibition in process was also developed during a series of one-year seminars, monthly seminars, where we discussed together with the artist how we're going to develop and prepare the exhibitionary moment. Then I selected 6 research projects for the screening program. And then I imagined to end the Bucharest Biennale with a curatorial workshop of 4 days, zooming in on the specificness of the biennial as a site of research, and the biennial symposium evaluating the specific position of prolific biennials. And the outcome of that then will be mapped in a series of publications. So let me start introducing the 3 keynote projects that we invited for this Bucharest Biennale. I call them artists, but basically they're collectives, people working together with groups of people in order to produce new works. And I invited them for not only producing work, but work that also includes different performative and discursive elements, presentation and interventions. The first artist is Tirkka Hapoja, collaborating with Laura Gustafsson, both from Finland, Renate Lorenz and her group from Austria, Germany, and Chong Ang from the Netherlands. I will come back later to the logistic catastrophe that happened because of COVID-19, so a lot of things had to be rescheduled, but let's first talk about the 3 different keynote projects. So this is the work of Gustafsson Hapoja Becoming, and again I quote from the article in the new journal Critical Curating. Gustafsson Hapoja's video work Becoming examines emergent ways of how to be a human in a world endangered by obsolete conceptions of humanity. In the video, 37 interviewees, artists, activists, children, politicians, teachers, caregivers, contemplate phenomena that are in a state of becoming at this very moment. Quote, in these video conversations, the specific question arises, how could artistic research contribute to forms of subjecthood and citizenship that are no longer determined by anthropocentric frameworks using the rhetoric of exclusivity or human exceptionalism? In this way, a future world could be built where care forms the basis of coexistence and communality, a world based on another biopolitics where the dominant perspective of the Homo economicus is replaced by the Homo ecologicus, that is substituted with a perspective characterized by polyphonic, imaginary, or collective empowerment, a sustainable existence, and a more than human community. So now I move to the work. It's time for other voices. Now this is the way it was installed in the Bucharest Biennale as a triptych, three videos projected. In the next slide, I will show you some minutes of the work to give you an impression of this specific video work.
How to know is engagement with the world, the physicality of the world. When I walk around, I touch things. I want to see what they feel like. I want to see their texture, their color. The only way to know is to use your senses, all that you have, to develop them as fully as you can, and then touch and then take it in.
I think that some people need to claim the human. I think that's really important. And when I say people, I mean specifically like Europeans, white people. And I don't mean this as white people as a whole, but like specifically those who have benefited from the category of whiteness need to claim the human. Because I think that there's something really detrimental about just throwing the human away. I think that if we throw the human away, we sort of there's this possibility of like reenacting the same mistakes that we've already committed. But at the same time, where I see us going, especially when I think about myself and I think about my people, or the people that I claim, or the things or organism creatures that I claim as belonging in my community, I guess I see us going somewhere completely different. I really see us imagining something new.
Like, what does it mean to not be sure? What does it mean to not know what we're seeing before we even see them? What does it mean to speak before we know what language should be?
If you're holding in common, a community which is holding in common something, there would be this whole process of co-producing, co-caring of responsibility, of co-governing around the commons. And then, of course, holding certain principles high in terms of equality and democracy.
Okay, I continue with the other keynote projects. This is a project by Renate Lawrence and team called The Politics of Aesthetics. This is a working group of researchers that claim that meaning production can be a violent tool of categorizing and othering, and that the concept of research has long been built on the concept of extractivism. What they had in mind was to organize a collective performance, and in that performance, they want to examine concepts that challenge, undermine, and transcend these processes of extractivism of research. And they introduced three perspectives: the perspective of refusal, opacity, and objection, as three possible political aesthetic ways of working in the art field. We plan to organize a 2-week collective public workshop in the Goethe Institute in Bucharest, but we had to postpone this because of COVID. And in the end, we could reformulate the project in order to present it in another context, the project, the Post-Research Condition, that I organized at BAC in Utrecht in 2021. So this is basically how we imagined it, in a space collectively working on exploring these 3 different strategies and concepts. But in the end, we had to organize it as in January 21, it was the second COVID crisis. We had to organize it on Zoom, also with individual performative elements included. Third project is by Dutch artist Chong Ang, who worked together with a group of artists and researchers, and he developed the project The Second Hands, which is a complex performative investigation that want to encounter exchange. And the starting point of this project was a travel through Europe, exploring the European borders, and in the end, staging a tribute of freedom in Bucharest. In the beginning, the project commissioned 5 different video works, one about political oppression, one about mass demonstration, one about coming of age in uncertain times, and a trip with a caravan through Europe to Romania that was filmed as a road movie. And then this whole project was supposed to end as a congregation in Bucharest, a collective performance as an ode to freedom. And through this collective performative act, Chong Ang and the company wanted to show at the back of the famous Ceausescu Parliament Palace, that is nowadays not only used as a parliament, but also as the space for the Museum of Contemporary Art. They wanted to put on stage artistic research as a mode of agency that can persuade, hunt, quest, express how difference is being performed. So this is the backside of this Ceausescu Palace. And the middle, where you see the elevators, there is the space of the Museum for Contemporary Art. And this is what Chong built for the congregation in Bucharest. A huge scaffolding for the performance. Looks a bit like a Fellini film set, including parking the caravan that traveled through Europe is a road movie, kind of Michael Escher situation. And then at the opening of the event, a series of performative acts. Now I'm looking at the screen. I'm also looking at you, Stephen. It's I think I have to speed up a little bit in order to get things done before 10 o'clock. So we had to, because of the COVID crisis, we had to reshuffle the program. Instead of ending with the curatorial workshop, we opened the program now with the workshop and the biennial symposium online. Then in the period after, we continued working on a publication that was just a continuation of the discussions with the researchers. As I mentioned before, I could allocate the keynote by Renate Lawrence in another context, and we had to postponed several times, first to May 21, then there was another Corona crisis. In the end, we could realize exhibitionary projects and the performative seminar in the context of Una Galleria. We could organize the screening program in the Romanian Museum of Literature, and we could organize Terika Hapuya's keynote project that I just showed in the Museum of Contemporary Art, the same building. That was where Chong Ang did his scaffolding performative act, even in the 2 years after the official opening of the Bucharest Biennale. So this is what we announced in March 22, that we had to reorganize the different programs. Publication, I mentioned, we realized in the period of the fall of 2020 in having collective editorial meetings. You can find the outcome of that in the Manuscript series online. Then we organized something exhibitionary. We planned, as I mentioned in the beginning, an open studio program and working stations that people work together. But now, due to this COVID situation, we had to completely do things in a more traditional way. We organized an exhibition by sending material by FedEx, did the installation by Zoom, and then in the end, 50% of the participants could travel to Bucharest, participate in a conference within the, let's say, scenography of the setting of the exhibition. So this is the stage that we developed. This is the installation view of the project in Una Galleria. This is it from the other side. Zoom in on some projects. This is the project by Irena Gheorghe that is focusing with a performative act on not accessible realities. She is focusing with her research on the study of what is not there. This is Eric Beltran, his project on reimagining the concept of truth from a more opaque perspective. I guess you know the work or the larger context of the work from his project he did in the last Documenta. And this is Stefan Misa from Austria, Philippines originally, presenting indeed a horizontal display system with strategies of discomfort. Then within that setting, we organized a performative conference. So you can see, we mentioned in the beginning that we used an old-fashioned theater for the presentations, but in the end, we had to do it in the setting of the exhibition. And this is Stephanie Misau discussing with Frans Jacobi about the research project. Research screenings, I presented 6 works of artists that I thought that were exemplary for the proposition of how we can understand artistic research as an intersection of creative practice and artistic thinking and curatorial strategies. 6 artists, Sylvia Amensaï and Bogdan Amanu from Romania, Ursula Biemann from Switzerland, Hanna Halonen from Finland, Kristina Ivanovska from Macedonia, Falca Pisano from the Netherlands, and Yanis Rava from Greece. And this was the simple way that we could present the work. We could use the attic of the Museum of Romanian Literature to present the works. Then I mentioned the curatorial research workshop that was supposed to happen at the very end of the Bucharest Biennale, but just due to the COVID, we started the curatorial workshop online. We developed the curatorial workshop in collaboration with our dear colleague Mick Wilson from Göteborg, and this workshop focused on the specificness of biennials as potential research sites, not only as an object of study, but also as a site of production of knowledge in its own right. The workshop was split in 4 different chapters, 4 perspectives on focusing on this specific question with the first day on exhibition genres and poetics, the second day on exhibition histories, the third day on exhibition inquiries, and the fourth one on exhibition imaginaries. Contributions from Nick Akins, who is also doing a lot of research on the research exhibition, Anselm Franke with his specific approach of the essay exhibition, Katalin George, Ola Hassanan, Lara Kaldi, current director of the Appel, Stephen Henry Madoff, and Paul O'Neill. We realized this workshop online with a screening at the Goethe Institute in Bucharest, and there was a follow-up presentation in the Pars Journal. So this is the outside of the Goethe Institute in Bucharest, where was also the banner with the program of the 9 Bucharest Biennale. And this is the inside of the Goethe Institute, where we screened the discussions and where also the participants from Romania could participate and intervene in the discussions. This was the outcome of the workshops, the publication done by Pars in Sweden. Then the other thing I wanted to realize for this Bucharest Biennale was a biennial symposium. I noticed that in 2010 there was already a biennial symposium called the Biennial Principle. And I felt it was a good moment 10 years later to reflect again on the specificness of the biennial decade, so to speak. In 2010, this conference was organized in collaboration with the Zurich University of the Arts. So for that reason, I contacted the program on curating from Dorothee Richter to invite her to collaborate and to develop together this biennial conference. And that was formulated as contemporary art biennials are hegemonic machines, how to use biennials progressively, how can biennials become imaginary machines to shape and influence possible futures. And we had a nice group of people there, like Ekaterina Dego, Patrick Flores, Farid Rakun, Jungma, Dorothee Richter. And in the end, this was also published on in the series of on curating. In this on curating, I published a small article, a statement that also relates to the question of today's discussion about the specificness of research exhibitions. I started my reflection with going back to an article by Okri and Wesser that reflected on non-centric biennials. And he noticed that there's a strong agency in this, in the specificness of these non-centric biennials. They are not so much connected with the spectacular capitalism, but they offer space for a counter-discourse, a multitude as a force of resistance. So you can also describe this as the power of the periphery. There is a critical distance that enables space for more complex perspectives. And also this power of the periphery enables a rethinking of the biennial. You see, in these peripheral biennials, there's a kind of unraveling of the format of the exhibition, not just an exhibition, but more an array of various activities. And then you notice an organic whole of exhibitions, events, meetings, workshops, and publications. So you can describe the peripheral biennial as a discursive environment, a space not for acceleration as in the spectacular capitalism, and more a space for slowing down and deceleration, a place for meaningful engagement, and a place where we can deploy the format of the research exhibition. So then here you can see you can, let's say, come to some features of the research exhibition. In the research exhibition, we see a certain amount of collectivity. People are working together. There's a way of collaboration. The curators are not so strong in developing the overarching theme work, but more act like conveners. In these research exhibitions, we also see a long-term preparation. It's not just selecting some artworks and put them on display, but we have workshops where we collectively work on the theme of the exhibition, the display system. In these discussions, we create some coherence. And also there's, in these discussions, a strong focus on the process of the exhibition, and there's space for speculation. So we allow ourselves to develop and disseminate other imaginaries, or so to speak, new articulations through and about the world. And I think here I will stop for today.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Henk. Since we are just at 10, and I had put in, please ask questions now. I don't see any questions.
There was one in the chat I saw.
Yeah. Owen, no, chat.
Oh, and that was you.
Was me.
I didn't see that.
Right.
But,
So if there aren't any questions, then we will end the public discussion and Henk will go right to the students.
Perfect.
Great.
See you
All
in
right.
outer space then.
Thank
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.